Core Italia wants to coordinate and gather clients, architects, designers, artisans, and builders. Architectural Elements Division showcases all the best of natural stone and terracotta. Windows and Doors Division is specialized in high-performance units made of wood, bronze, steel, and aluminum. Handcrafted in Europe, our building materials bring together the vibrant place you call home.
Welcome to the first virtual ceremony in the 18th Biannual Design Awards hosted by American Institute of Architects, San Mateo County Chapter. My name is Juliet Hsu and the 2020 President of AIA SMC. It is a pleasure to have you join us in this celebration and to recognize outstanding achievements in architecture and design in San Mateo County. Personally, I want to thank our Executive Director, Jackie Tanner, for working tirelessly to make sure that the needs of our members are met despite the various challenges in 2020, which so far has included a worldwide pandemic, social injustices, and political turmoil here in this country, as well as wildfires in California. All of that is to say that producing architecture in conversation with its environment, whether it be suburban, coastal, urban, or anywhere in between, is more important than ever. As we navigate these uncharted waters, I want to also thank our members for continuing to show up at our monthly online events and for their continued support. To the architects receiving awards today, congratulations! To our viewers, we simply cannot wait to see you again in person at fellowship meetings or other chapter events in 2021. Our celebration would not be possible without the generous support of our Design Award sponsors, whose company logos and video you saw earlier. Next, I'd like to introduce Margaret Williams, the 2020 Design Awards mentor. She's been incredible with sharing her decade-long experience regarding Design Awards and assisting our committee for putting this celebration together.
Hello and welcome. I'm Margaret Williams and I'm part of the Design Awards Committee, along with Juliet Hsu and our chairperson, Mohammed Sedki. We've been busy putting this event together and we've had a lot of fun doing it. Juliet and Mohammed have done an awesome job searching out the right mix for the jury, and Mohammed will be introducing us to the jury shortly. Mohammed's kept us on track with planning and with collaborating with our talented videographer from ASZ Photography. Juliet hosted us in her safely in her lovely courtyard home. And as for me, I basically logged into all the conference calls and added my 2 cents along the way. In addition to the committee and the videographer, we also had the assistance of our chapter executive director, Jackie Tanner. So Jackie brought her usual energy and creativity and helpfulness to the process. So thank you, Jackie. With regards to the eligibility of a project for submittal, there are a couple of things to note as set forth in our guidelines. A project to be submitted for 2020 San Mateo County AIA Design Awards must meet one of the two criteria. It's either a project within San Mateo County by an architect from anywhere, or it needs to be a project that can be anywhere, but it needs to be by an architect from San Mateo County, either practicing or residing in San Mateo County. Let me tell you about the awards categories that you'll be seeing tonight. The awards will be given in 3 levels: citation, merit, and honor awards, with honors being the highest level of award. The categories are architecture, interior architecture, and residential architecture. The Architecture Award celebrates projects in any number of categories: civic, institutional, hospitality, mixed use, multifamily residential. It's awarded without regard for budget or size or style, and it can be a new project or a renovation of an existing building. Interior architecture awards a project that is a build-out of a shell and core, a tenant improvement, or some other similar interior project. It also is awarded without regard to budget or size or style, and it can be new or renovation. Residential architecture has the constraint that it must be a single-family residence, but again, no constraints for budget or size or style of architecture. It can be a new building or a renovation. It can be an addition or a remodel. It can even be a prefab modular building. And we have one additional award. For the first time ever for our chapter, we have the People's Choice Awards. Each project that was submitted was eligible and was in fact included in the online ballot. And in fact, we had hundreds of people log in and cast their vote for their favorite projects. It was really exciting. Voting on the projects was set up so that each person could only vote once. So you can be assured this was a safe and secure voting system, and there'll be no voter fraud in this election. With that, I turn it over to Mohammed to tell us more about the jury selection process and introduce us to the jury. Thanks.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Juliet, for the great introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Mohammed Sidki. I'm the 2020 Design Award Chair and President-elect San Mateo County. 2020 has been a year that is filled with challenges. Some of you may ask, how can we address these challenges through a design award? Well, as a committee, we had two responses. First, when we were writing down the criteria for evaluating the projects, we made sure that sustainability, innovation, equity, and social justice have an emphasis on selecting the awarded projects. The second part of the response was in the selection of the jury. We made sure to select jurors who are great designers and leaders in the fields of sustainability, equity, and social justice. Without further ado, I'm excited to introduce our jurors for 2020 Design Awards, Craig Hartman, Rosa Sheng, and Takashi Yanai. Craig Hartman, FAIA, is a senior consultant design partner at SOM. His international design work ranges from entire urban districts to singular work of landmark architecture. His projects have been widely published, and examples of the work are held as part of SF MoMA's permanent collection. Hartman's architecture is particularly noted for environmental sustainability and its nuanced consideration of the relationship between material, structure, form, and natural light. His work has been recognized over 225 awards for design, including 10 national AIA honor awards for architecture, interior, and urban design. He is the recipient of California's Maybach Award and has taught, lectured, and juried work at multiple architecture programs in the United States, Europe, South America, and Asia. Rosa Sheng, FAIA. Rosa is a principal at Smith Group, studio leader of higher education, and director of equity, diversity, and inclusion. She was the AIA San Francisco president in 2018 and funding chair of Equity by Design. As a licensed architect with 24 years of experience in architecture and design, Rosa has led a variety of award-winning and internationally acclaimed projects, from the aesthetically minimal, highly technical development of the glass structure for Apple's original high-profile retail stores, to the innovative and sustainable projects for institutions of higher learning, such as Certified Lori I. Lockey Graduate School of Business at Mills College in Oakland, California. Rosa's thought leadership and activism has been recognized for catalyzing national movement for equitable practice in architecture, marked by 3 pivotal surveys and public speaking outreach, both nationally and abroad, including TEDx Philadelphia, Cannes Lions Festival, Harvard, Stanford, KQED, NPR in 2019. Rosa was recognized as a Metropolis game changer for her pivotal work with the equitable practice movement. Takashi Yanai, FAIA, is a partner at Ehrlich, Yanai, Recchini Architects and has been the residential studio director since 2004. Takashi brings a keen sensitivity to site and context, coupled with a strong appreciation for the craft of the buildings. His houses are a profound articulation of the relationship between man and nature that underscores architecture's power to enhance our environment. Prior to practicing architecture, Takashi was a design journalist for GA Houses in Tokyo, where he had the privilege of engaging with the world's finest residential architects. Takashi is the incoming chair of the AIA Committee on Design and is currently also on the SF MoMA Architecture and Design Accessions Committee. Alongside architecture, Takashi has a strong interest in photography and social media. Takashi has over 50,000 followers on his Instagram account. Now, let's hear a few words from our awesome jurors.
Good evening. It was a pleasure to serve with Takashi and Rosa on this year's jury. It's always a delight to see the new work that's emerging in the Bay Area. And I want to congratulate not only the winners, but also encourage everyone who participated and submitted entries into the program this year. I know it's a huge effort to submit work for scrutiny by a jury of your architectural peers, but doing so, in my opinion, conveys the message that we are serious about our work, both as a professional and as an artistic enterprise. Rosa, Takashi, and I spent a lot of time together talking about the qualities that we thought should be evident in the winning work. Of course, these include the ancient Vitruvian qualities of well-made architecture as highly functional and beautiful. But we were also searching for responses to unique issues of our time. These include especially work that contributes to the mitigation of climate change, work that reuses existing conditions, work that minimizes consumption, and work that is compact and demonstrates the thoughtful use of densifying transit-served walkable communities rather than sprawl. And finally, we hope to find work that will seek to further democratize our public realm through inclusive design. So we realize that these are tall orders. We're architects after all, and we have to use the cards that our clients deal us. I know that most of us are really fortunate to have well-intentioned clients, but I'm sure that, like me, you've never had a client with a unicorn project that has all those qualities in a single brief. Transit, density, walkable neighborhood, adaptive reuse, net zero energy goals, and a highly inclusive and publicly spirited program. Not to mention a more than adequate budget. Oh, of course, and neighbors who would absolutely love to have a major new building in their backyard. So we're lucky if we have a couple of these in our project site and program. And this isn't new. Michelangelo and Bernini had similar complaints. So recognizing this, we looked carefully for work that transcended these constraints and found ways to achieve distinctive architecture that contributes to the regeneration of the environment and the community. In the end, for me at least, to be worthy of an award, a project has to achieve the third, the most elusive probably, and the most important of the Vitruvian qualities. And that is, it must be delightful to behold and experience. It's that quality of delight that makes architecture worthy of renewal by future generations and is the highest form of sustainability our work can achieve. We feel that we found a number of projects that rise to this level, and we're delighted to have the opportunity to share them and to recognize them this evening. Thank you.
I think that Craig, Takashi, and I had some really interesting conversations while we were deliberating about each of the design projects that were submitted. And while we were looking for something that was unique and forward-thinking in how it was executed aesthetically, I was constantly trying to raise the consciousness of where we are in the context of 2020 and the value of what architects need to bring to the table. Given all the challenges that we're facing right now, I think that we need to change the narrative of what architects do and a sense of greater purpose. So beyond the aesthetics, how are we addressing sustainability challenges? How are we addressing human health and wellness issues? How are we addressing social inequity and racism in our current climate and our communities? And so beyond just the gestures of the building looking beautiful, the forms and details being executed well. We really try to raise that in the deliberation of our conversations as far as that sensitivity to the environment, the sensitivity to human value, and what we as architects can do to elevate those very critical issues.
I think it was interesting that many of the projects in this batch for 2020 were adaptive reuse projects. I think that's something that we're going to see a lot more of in the future. So what really is encouraging to see is that some of the adaptive reuse projects really are as beautiful or more beautiful than you can imagine a ground-up building. So I think that's a challenge that architects can take head on, and it's a sustainable approach to our built environment. So there's so much of it that is existing, but why not use the assets that we already have and repurpose them and give them new life, or give them, in some cases, a better life going forward. And I think architects, despite all these other aspects to architecture that we have to contend with and that are very important in terms of how we shape the built environment, we can also do these things in a beautiful way. So that is very encouraging to see, that we can design spaces that work for communities, that we can do adaptive reuse, we can have sustainable architecture without compromising beauty and creating uplifting spaces.
In the next hour, we will hear from architects who have made the hard but responsible decision of saving and transforming existing structures to modern buildings. Architects who made sure not to cut a single tree on their site and decided to work with the context to place their buildings. Architects who made the user's health and wellness the center of their design. And we'll hear from architects who were successful in creating places that were inclusive and welcoming to all. Now back to Juliet to introduce the winners in the Architecture Award category.
The Citation Award in Architecture goes to the Bay Meadows Urban Village, designed by HOK San Francisco.
So this is a significant piece of land that's been transformed over time, throughout history, from an airfield to a racetrack into what is now becoming an important mixed-use community. The particular piece we're looking at is the commercial piece of this is directly adjacent to a new Caltrain station, serving the occupants of this place, and it addresses a very challenging aspect of our transformation of the suburbs, which is densification, inserting large footprint buildings into a context that has been much lower scale, and doing so in a way that creates variegation, life, and social animation. These large footprint office buildings are very challenging to incorporate into a low-scale environment such as this. It brings a new life to this place, uses our transportation infrastructure in a very powerful way. So it's we think it's a very, very good example of inserting a large footprint, large-scale architecture into a low-scaled community environment.
Hello, I'm Paul Wolford. I'm the project designer. I couldn't be more happy to be here, and I really wanted to thank the chapter, Wilson-Meany Development, and the community of San Mateo. It was a real privilege. The design concept was really born from Chris Meany's vision for the Bay Meadows Village. What he wanted to do was take an abandoned racetrack and turn it into a real model of new urban living, sustainability, a place where people could live, work, enjoy themselves, and recreate. The way in which the design process was organized is we built a model together about the size of this room. So it was about 15 by 25 feet long at scale. And every design team, every time we would meet, would bring in different study models and array them out. So the 65 acres of site was constantly changing and evolving as the design progressed. For me, perhaps the lesson learned was also one of my favorite aspects of having worked on the project. And that was what I'm going to call co-opetition, the collaboration amongst the many different design professionals and firms involved. Because we worked in this environment together from day one, we were able to create something that really the sum is far greater than the number of parts involved. So the project responds to its community and context by not seeing itself as an island inside of San Mateo, but really seeing itself as an extension of the beautiful village character and scale. One of the things that the planners wanted to do from day one was make sure that the heights felt appropriate to the surrounding neighborhood. And so all of the development is really scaled to feel harmonious with San Mateo as it is today. I think the Bay Meadows Village was prescient in looking at how to create a diverse and inclusive place. From the inception of its design concept, it was designed to be something that really mixed in with the community and in which the community was invited in to the very grounds and right to the front door of these developments for places where they could play bocce, they could have their children there, they could enjoy themselves, they could have a beer with friends and a taco, they could play ping pong. Anything or anyone in the neighborhood could feel just as at home sitting right next to these buildings full of technology tenants as the people inside the buildings themselves. Real sustainability isn't something that's actually added on after a building's designed. True sustainability is designed from its inception. And from the conceptual beginnings of the Bay Meadows Village, we looked at it through the lens of how to create the most high-performing and thoughtful and healthy workplace one could imagine for the people who'd be inhabiting it. There were several key things we did. One of them was looking for an environment in which no one is more than about 35 feet or 40 feet from a window. We looked for it so that wherever you are in the building, you actually had the ability to temper and modulate the environment you're in. We worked hand in glove with interface engineering and with the Wilson Meany team to look at a building that every single attribute all added up to something more. So that allowed the building to become LEED Gold with the opportunity to reach a platinum level depending upon the added layer of renewables. I actually am really excited about the material palette for the project. What we did is we actually used a kind of kit of parts approach. Board form concrete, rain screen terracotta skin walls, and 3 sizes of window. And we combined them in slightly different ways for every building and every wing, slightly adjusting the terracotta so that if you look at the block, what we were able to achieve was extraordinary economy of purchase and a visual delight because it feels harmonious but unique, and it changes and adapts as it moves along the block. You know, as architects, we spend all of this time thinking of the building and its creation and process, and we spend all of this energy getting it built. But one of my favorite things to do in a project is to actually go and be there and not tell anyone that I was the designer and be with them, watching them inhabit it. And because the way the village is organized, you know, it's full of children, it's full of people playing bocce, people having a beer and eating a taco, coming to and from work. For me, just being in that mosh pit of human life and watching the village just thrive is just so tremendously exciting.
And the second Citation Awards in Architecture goes to Biomed Life Science Campus, designed by HOK San Francisco.
So this project demonstrates, I think, how far Silicon Valley has come architecturally. Not long ago, this project would have been tilt-up precast with a sea of asphalt parking around it. The campus itself is very, very consistent, and yet the individual buildings, while being made of repetitive pieces, are nuanced. The fluid form, the way that light moves across it, and around it throughout the day, the variation of the depth of facade that responds to the solar orientation is subtle but very, very rigorous, very interesting, and very carefully and well made. So it's a quality of architecture that is certainly welcome, a welcome transformation of this part of Silicon Valley, and is, I think, a model for the kind of architecture that can and should be, we should see more of in this environment.
Thank you. It's really exciting to be back. I really want to share our appreciation to the San Mateo AIA chapter, to Biomed Realty Development, and to the community of Foster City. So the concept for the project was to create a campus that felt like these really tinsel, crystalline machines sitting in a park. We were blessed with an extraordinary site. Here's 17 acres that sit at the edge of a slough and just by the edge of the bay. There was a development there before. That was all taken down, and then the site was repurposed and imagined as a place for life science. Because of the absence of a notable surrounding, one of the things that was most important for the project and for the development success was to create a there. And so the way we achieved it was by using what we thought of as machines in the park. So these tinsel silver buildings sit surrounding a large multi-acre open quadrangle, which has amenities around the edges and direct access to the waterfront, so one could go kayaking at your lunch break. The building's exterior facade was conceived through a real lens of sustainability. It does two key things. It expands and contracts its module as it moves around the building, and it tightens to the glazing and expands out to 18 inches from the glazing, depending upon its relationship to its solar responsiveness. Where it's north-facing, the curtain wall goes tight. As it moves to the south, it expands out and the vertical fins narrow, so that you're always modulating the response of the skin design to its solar relationship of its environment. Although there are 4 buildings, no 2 buildings ever look alike from any vantage point because they're each responding in a unique way because of their own orientation. Human-centric design was a central tenet of the way we approached the project. It was quite simple, actually. We used slender wing buildings so that you're never more than about 40 feet from a window in any occupied space. So daylight and view is always shared by everyone. And on the ground plane, we reserved most of it for an open park. Grass, areas of congregation, opportunities to play basketball, bocce, take your kayak at lunch out, to get on the slough, to go in the delta of Foster City. So it was really designed to be a place for both science, deep research, and simple human enjoyment of the environment. A lesson learned for me from this project is that every community needs to be spoken to in the way that they address themselves. The folks of Foster City have a very thoughtful, and they're quite proud of their community, as they should be. And so one of the things that always struck me is to understand who they were and how they needed to be communicated with, so that myself as an architect and our development team felt like we were welcome and an integral part of the community, not someone coming in from outside to do something that didn't feel right and appropriate for Foster City. So I'm fortunate to have a wonderful partner in a gentleman named Brian Yinchek. He leads our planning and landscape group in our practice in San Francisco. And from day one, Brian and I designed this project together because it was as equally important for the architecture, the sitescape, and the landscape to be conceived as one. You couldn't separate them at all. They were really thought of as a totality. And for any emerging professional, I would encourage you to make sure that when you're finding an opportunity to do something with another professional discipline, find the right partner, and what you'll find is that the outcome is going to be far more extraordinary than you could have ever anticipated.
And the Merit Award in Architecture goes to Menlo Atherton High School STEM Building, designed by LPA Design Studios.
What I enjoyed about this building was that, in a way, it wasn't really about the building at all. It was about the trees. I really like this mirrored bridge element as part of the circulation. I think it's a whimsical use of the material. And I believe this extension from the building also is part of the stormwater management leading to a rain garden. But I also liked how the mirror surface amplifies and reflects the greenery on the site. I liked also how the skin of the building was responding to the orientation and responding also to the trees. So the exterior of the building is more taut, and it has much more glass towards the north, so it's not trying to manage the direct sun. But on the courtyard side, you have these cantilevered overhangs, and you have these exterior circulation, so movement to and from the classrooms is really animating that courtyard. I think it did a really nice job of creating that sense of community within the building.
So my name is Helen Pierce. I'm design director at LPA San Jose Studio. And thank you very much for this Merit Award for the Menlo Atherton High School STEM building. We're very honored. So on behalf of all the people at LPA and our other consultants who worked on this, and our client most importantly, thank you for this award. Well, Menlo Atherton High School is really defined by its mature heritage-size oak trees. And the trees really pepper the campus and are an important part of the ecosystem of the entire neighborhood, the Atherton neighborhood where the school is located, as well as a valuable resource for shade and learning opportunities. So respecting the importance of the oak trees, the new building was planned around the oak trees, and the STEM building is also bordered by athletic fields and tennis courts, and that second floor circulation sort of reaches out to both to provide overlooks to those athletic fields. So the design concept really was about a dialogue between the gifts of the site and the STEM building. There really wasn't a concept with a capital C. What we did is let the forces of the site sort of take us where they wanted to go. The two large oak trees on this pretty small site really determined where and how the building could sit on the site. So Early on, we coined this project Dances with Trees, and we did that because, in a way, the new STEM building really does sort of dip and dive and open and close in response to the shape and the form and the moves of the trees. Beyond that, we saw how intertwining of the building and the trees would provide learning moments for the students by connecting up close with the sort of micro ecosystem created by the trees. And the trees provided great sustainability benefits, of course, to the building and the site as they shade the building from the south and from the west. And finally, we let the systems of the trees, such as the roots, barks, leaf, rings, inspire how we articulated the building and the site. The pattern of the exterior walls of the building are kind of like the bark. The sinuous stairs, they go up to the second floor, kind of like the roots. And there's an oversized roof gutter that collects all the roof rainwater and deposits in a single rain garden. That's kind of like a leaf. The sustainability goals for the STEM building really focused on low cost and demonstrative passive strategies, such as good orientation, providing overhangs and balconies to minimize solar gain and reduce energy use. And that really worked in conjunction with the saving of those trees, because the trees also shade the building from the east and the west. We also collected rainwater off of the entire roof and kept it entirely on site and treated it in a rain garden. As a result, the new STEM building realized a 73% energy savings below baseline, and that placed it on track to exceed the 2030 commitment target. So in terms of equity, diversity, inclusion, social justice, Menlo Atherton High School really pulls from diverse neighborhoods and has students with pretty large disparity of socioeconomic backgrounds. That has sometimes resulted in separate and discrete hangout spaces on the campus. During the master planning phase for the school, we really took a holistic approach to develop connected outdoor spaces that link all the new facilities and really importantly bring students together on a level playing field. So the biggest challenges of the project, there were just the technical challenges of building so close to very large and old trees. This really determined the type of foundations. It determined how we routed utilities, many of which had to be hand dug. The new hardscape and landscape also had to be designed to not radically change how much water the existing trees were getting, because they were used to getting a certain amount of water for 80 years. So you can't radically change that. And it really took the entire integrated team of engineers, landscape architects, the arborists, and our client to recognize the effort to save the trees, but also the value of the trees.
And the honor award in architecture goes to Indian Creek Library, designed by Group 4 Architecture, Research, and Planning.
In the jury discussions, we collectively agreed that this project was very unique and brilliant in the way it did many of execution of the design moves. Number one, repurposing a big box grocery store to fulfill a community need was very clever in not only the way they did it, because you couldn't even tell that it was that original use, but the simple use of materials in a very restrained way, really letting the space elevate the real purpose, which is to house the books. And the books are kind of the prime actor, if you will, in the space. The way the lighting and the furniture is kind of a backdrop to that main event is really unique. I love the way that they used biological references to shading and biomimetics in a very simplistic way in the front of the building and the exterior, and how that carried through into the interior with gestures of the similar panel structures in the skylight when you walk into the welcome area. I loved the simplicity of the furniture that was used, very warm and inviting. There are elements such as the fireplace lounge and the wood paneling that really gave you a sense of being in a home away from home. And again, they didn't have a lot of use of very complicated ceiling systems. You could see the exposed ductwork, etc. But there were elements such as these large skylight illuminators that really brought the light in and gave the whole space a sense of airiness and comfort.
So my name's David Schnee. I'm a principal at Group 4 Architecture Research and Planning here in South San Francisco. Go South City. Shout outs to my fellow design principal, Andrea Gifford, our associate and senior designer, Daniel LaRasa. Those guys were in the trenches every day. Sean Zadke, design principal at Gould Evans, and the managing partner of the Kansas City office of Gould Evans, Dennis Strait. All of them a fantastic team. The Indian Creek Library is located in Olathe, Kansas, which is in the county seat of Johnson County, which is in the metropolitan area of Kansas City. So the design concept for this project originates from its basic premise, which is that we are starting with an abandoned supermarket. So something built in the 70s or 80s, cheap big box construction, placeless, poor identity, sea of parking lot in a community that expanded quickly. It's one of the fastest growing communities in the Midwest, and looking to expand its library services is creating a sense of civic place. So what do we do with this big box? But we take this and we strip it down to its core structure, we reinvent it. So we strip the exterior of the building to create a whole new identity with wonderful curtain walls. We also are trying to bring the outdoors in, not just through natural light, but cutting courtyards into the building as well. And so the sea of parking lot there, we want to re-landscape. We want to let it return back to its natural form. So we create a beautiful vegetated promenade. We stop the dominance of car traffic on the site coming straight up to the door. We pull it further away. We let the pedestrian path from the nearby street and from nearby walkways and the Indian Creek, for which this library is named. We reconnect that building to the landscape and let that landscape be pulled into the interior. The diagram of the building starts with this box. And so then we peel away its facades and we create new landscaped corridors that redefine the approach to the building. As we reskin the box, we're happy with concrete block, but we want to create transparency. We use expansive glass and then shielded it with a artistically conceived sunscreen. One of the important design criteria and considerations as we were preparing the design was to create a flexible project. It used to be the librarians being saying shh, and you had to sit in rows of chairs. Now it's a dynamic space, so we acoustically zoned it so that the noisy spaces, a maker space with the machines and things, are enclosed. The next glass box we made, and a little jewel box, was the quiet study room. And so we just have this lovely box, and you can come in from the hustle and bustle of all the activity. You want to just sit back, comfortable chair, read a book, but still you get the view of all the activities around it. So the acoustic zoning was one of our pleasures. The entire collections are all on mobile gondolas. We have more than we put into any other library so that they can flip this building into any sort of function at any time. So we have that type of flexibility. And then we want to think about flexibility over time. And so what will the media be that people are coming to borrow in 10 or 20 years? So we have a raised floor, shallow raised floor for changing the data and power distribution to however the space may need to be. And we have expansion space that we may be able to grow into when the need or opportunity arises. Sustainability was a big consideration in the use of our materials throughout the process. One of them was having a minimum of materials there. So we just let the structure be exposed, painted it dark, took actually duct liner and just had that affixed to the underside of the roof deck to be a very low cost way to get the necessary acoustical treatment. This project really responds to its community context in that it is a meeting place of all the diverse people in the community. They are great library lovers, so people of all different ages, all different walks of life come together and share the same space, attend the same program. Every project has its challenges. This project had reusing an existing building that was not super well built to begin with. We weren't able to reuse quite as much as we had hoped. When we were redoing the roof, we found we had to replace more of it. We had to work within our budget, but all of the constraints, which were numerous, helped lead to this solution. One of Group 4's specialties is being able to really work collaboratively and bring in the voices of lots and lots of people. We had an advisory committee that was made up of community stakeholders from business and communities of faith participated. All of those voices came together, and it was our job to then take that inspiration and give it form, and so it was great.
For the category of interior architecture, the citation award goes to DES Architects and Engineers for 181 Fremont Public Lobbies. Congrats.
This project is an interesting evolution of the corporate office building lobby. It begins by having not one but two lobbies, one at street level and one at the elevated level of the Transbay Park in San Francisco. These two lobbies together really operate to find ways to bring the public into these buildings in ways that corporate lobbies of the past have not done. So it is, I think, a very, very strong idea around the way that buildings can now enliven and be a part of the public realm, to not simply be a corporate place in isolation, branded as a separate place, a place from the public realm, but rather places that welcome the public in. And so the upper lobby especially is effective in doing this by opening up its facade to the park and bringing not just the users of the building, but the public into this space in a very inclusive manner. So it is a hint at what we can be doing moving forward in our in buildings that otherwise are simply multi-use office buildings into places that are really for the public.
Okay, wow. We are so honored to have received this award. It's truly wonderful feeling. My name is Jana Gunsel. I am a partner at DES Architects and Engineers. I head up the interiors group here. I'm also the managing partner for our San Francisco office. We want to thank our client, J. Paul Company, profusely for this opportunity and their wonderful partnership with us on it, as well as Level 10 Construction, who brought to the table some amazing tradespeople to work with, problem solving all the way in some very challenging situations. The project area south of Market is traditionally called SOMA. There is a new real estate term now called East Cut for this very particular growing part of San Francisco. Well, we had a great opportunity in this project to generate some concepts that were very different from each other, but actually created very similar outcome. And ideally, it was the sense of inclusion and welcoming that we were looking for in both spaces. The ground level being more formal, but yet still inviting with areas for collaboration and plugging in, as well as observing the art. And then upstairs to the park level, where it's much more residential in feel, smaller scale, warmer. I think the use of a lot of wood and a lot of smaller scale materials to facilitate that. And then, of course, Andy Town is bringing in these great wafts of coffee being roasted and the smells of the bakery and making it feel like a coffee shop. From an interiors perspective on this, 10,000 square foot lobby, the sustainability aspect of this was choosing materials that are timeless and that are exceptionally durable, 100-year materials that will last the test of time and not be wasted. Just thinking about the building and the original design intent, we were given this beautiful structure to work with, beautiful mega braces and how they hit the ground and the clear spans of structural glass that we were able to take advantage of. Just their sheer beauty. It was a wonderful element of the building to be working with. And we reinforced that by cladding the interior core with a wood product. It's actually a wood panel, Saroost oak, and we used that material to create more verticality and also to create a depth of center and a sense of strength for the building interior. The detailing of it was interesting because there was so much that we had to conceal in those walls, whether it was future signage, secreted doors for access to AV equipment, electrical closets, emergency control rooms, all of these doors that needed to be concealed. So we developed an undulating pattern of plank sizes and reveals so that we could create sections that would be easily taken out in the future should they need to be, as well as these massive doors that needed to open, and then you go into the fire door, the actual door that's behind it, to access a room. So when we were looking for the art for this building, we really kept that serenity and that quality of contemplation as part of our goal. We were able to source a 13-foot tall marble sculpture, and her name is Duna. She weighs 5,500 pounds or more. And so just the logistics of getting her from Barcelona to the site and installing her was a bit of a feat. I'd really like to thank the AIA and the jury for selecting our project for this great award.
For the category of interior architecture, the Merit Award goes to HOK San Francisco for Open Text in San Mateo. Congratulations.
This interiors project was really inspiring for the minimalist gestures. It took a lot of restraint, and yet at the same time, there was a strong deference to the company's ethos and branding in terms of the way the expression of the interior of fenestration and detailing of the textures and surfaces, reflecting something that's hard to do in terms of using less is more. And so the things that they did leverage in large quantities was an abundance of intentional open space for collaboration and that kind of mixing and melting pot area, as well as distinct and clear wayfinding and views to be able to see not only across a hallway, but between first and second floor stories when entering the lobby space in the building. And the conference rooms, we really appreciated, had a lot of natural light into the offices as well, full height ceiling with glazing, really leveraging the borrowed light.
Hi, I'm Daniel Herriot from HOK. I'm the Interior Design Director. I'm very fortunate to have been the designer on OpenText. Well, delighted to receive the award, the Merit Award for OpenText. That's a real honor. Thank you very much. Well, the concept for OpenText is we work with them globally. Their ambition for the project was to create a sophisticated technology center, one that was really focused on their users' well-being, one that was really inviting for their families, a space they could bring their families into and feel welcome for guests, clients, that sort of thing. We designed a central, we called it a social epicenter for the facility, a central landmark. You saw the staircase in the pictures, something recognizable there. That space itself is a multi-use space which they use for social gatherings. It's a breakout space for coffees and also for all hands gatherings as well, for messaging, announcements, that sort of thing. I would say designing with flexibility, it solved a lot of problems for OpenText. Being able to design multi-use space and leverage the flexibility that people bring is probably one of the biggest gifts. So creating that central space I mentioned and doubling it up as a large training center or welcome center, address the people, invite your families in, and having that change its use during the days, that satisfied for a lot of program square foot. And we were able to flank that central space with conference rooms that were linked to the reception. Ideas like that, just how you play with space, leverage the receptionist to become more of a floor manager. And that one person who sat behind a reception desk previously now is an engaged, important member of that community. And it's made a world of difference to their daily lives. So that was a lesson I took away, just how space and how you play with space can change a person's life quite significantly. OpenText challenged us to weave their brand into the design of this facility. So we took a literal idea and we had fun with it. We took the source code and worked with them to find out the first source code that OpenText, I think, wrote. We actually got that code from them and worked with them and a metal fabricator to punch the source code out of metal panel. And we clad that over some glass for some of the meeting rooms. But the way we positioned it, the direct sunlight goes through there and you start to get the source code appear on the floor and it moves throughout the day. It was actually a really beautiful result. So the building is actually LEED Gold. The project, we used a lot of strategies to match that caliber of qualification. Lots of open plan workspace. They favored the perimeter. So we could maximize the amount of daylight spread. We achieved actually it was about a 79% ratio of people actually working in natural light, good natural light, not direct sunlight. That alone takes care of a lot of the energy use intensity. For the acoustics, we use strategy, not just mass and density. OpenText still offer offices to some senior personnel, but they're not exclusive. So we designed the offices to also become huddle spaces. So when they're not used, anyone can use them for a meeting, and they're very proximate to the open work areas as well.
Yeah, so maybe you want to talk about the stair or anything there?
Yes, I do. I want to talk about the stair. Oh gosh. We did maybe a dozen designs for that stair. What became very apparent was we had to get the stair into the building somehow. And so we had to design it to fit through a window. And I remember the day it was being craned up on the outside, and it's got this curve to it, it's a beautiful curve to the stair, but it was prefabricated in one piece. But that whole thing had to be craned at an angle through the window. That was a nail-biting day. But that stair actually became a very important, iconic part of the design. For OpenText, they've got beautiful offices, and there's always a little moment about each project which differentiates it. It becomes iconic and recognizable for them, so they can look at an image of or a broadcast coming from an office and recognize where that office is. And this staircase actually became that landmark for the project. It was quite remarkable. We're very proud of what we did for them. We hope they enjoy it for many years to come.
For the category of interior architecture, a merit award goes to Flad Architects for Corporate Scientific Workplace. Congratulations.
I found this project very inspiring, not only in the general themes that were weaved throughout related to connecting sustainability, but also human wellness and connectedness, sense of belonging to the workspace. We often hear about the long hours that staff members spend in the workplace. And this project really spoke to me in terms of intentionally trying to make the workplace feel intuitively comfortable. And so we do have conversations about sustainability and equity and that human sense of productivity and sense of purpose. And this project really, for me, tried to hit home on those themes in a very effective way. It was tastefully done. It wasn't overtly literal, but again, there were abstractions of nature that permeated throughout the space, in addition to one's ability to always have views to the outside and a sense of natural daylight, which was really important, I think, in today's day and age when oftentimes we overlook that connectedness to nature when we're working, especially long hours these days. Obviously, this is pre-COVID, but still very relevant to crafting interior spaces, again, that speak to the human spirit in terms of inspiration, but also the idea of our wellness being very important.
Hi, my name is David Bryant. I'm with Flad Architects in the Seattle office. We have 9 offices across the country, and our focus is on S&T, science and technology. We want to, first of all, just want to express how honored we are to receive this AIA award, and want to thank everyone involved in the committee who bestowed us with this great honor. Thank you. The main concept of this project references the theme of the Northwest, and with that we wanted to bring in the idea of a river and the life-giving properties of a river. This is also about the science that they're doing with cancer cure. So we referenced the sort of cellular nature of what they might see actually looking through a microscope of a cell, or a healthy cell, and basically took that and developed that as a graphic as you move through the space. This client came to us with a challenge, and that was to give them a really premium space for an executive level group in a very short amount of time. We started this project in the fall of 2018, and we delivered this project. They occupied it in the early spring of 2019. So this was a real challenge. I think one of the best things about this project was the people that we got to work with. We worked with this client on multiple projects, and we had a lot of fun delivering a project that provided really beautiful space for this client in a new location. And that to me was probably the most rewarding thing is to walk away from this project with a happy client and a friendship.
My name is Bendy Robertus. I am the design director and studio practice lead for FLAD's Seattle office, and am accepting this honor on behalf of our wonderful project team, which worked together on this very diligently and really enjoyed putting it together. How we address community within this project was really bred out of an idea around workplace culture and the evolution of workplace culture, in which it's encouraged for members of this company to bring their whole selves to work. And so what we really strove to do with the amenities and the design of the space was to create avenues for people to collaborate, for them to mobilize together to be more effective in their work, but also to bond so that their workday culture was really more of an idea of an expression of the whole full dimension of life, rather than just what someone might do with the middle 8 hours of their day. So with regard to sustainability, our practice has really been focused on adaptive reuse, and in this particular application, what that meant to us was using the best of what's there. And the best of what was there in this building is really a generous amount of daylight that we borrowed and reborrowed and reborrowed as many times as we could to limit the need for supplemental lighting. We also really limited any use of materials that would have volatile organic compounds or any off-gassing. We really see that as an obligation to future occupants and users of the space for their health and wellness. And then finally, we looked at biophilia by using some of the patterns from the wooded areas where this company originated on some of the glass areas and films, and in some of the fabric areas to reintroduce that natural pattern. Well, for big challenges, adapting an existing building is always challenging. You're working with somebody else's skeleton, somebody else's bones. I think most architects know what that feels like. Probably the biggest decision we made that got the lid off was surprising. It wasn't to clear out space. It was to put something in our own way. And this metaphorical object of a stone in the river, this reception area and meeting space that we put right at the crux of these two major, at the confluence of these two major corridors within the space, served as that way that we sort of got away from the bones of what was already there and started to create something that was really its own form.
Moving on to the residential architecture category. Citation Award for Residential Architecture goes to SAW Spiegel Ihara Workshop for Suburban Pastoral.
So I really admire the way that this building brings density into its single-family residential neighborhood. It does so with a simplicity of form and elegance that is belies its the sophistication of the way of the spaces it creates. It's a very simple yet elegant melding of architecture, landscape, and light in a way that brings density and yet a sense of delight for its occupants and users. I think it's a wonderful model for the way that we could begin to densify our suburbs and create housing where we need it, while still maintaining the quality and nature of its low-density suburban neighborhood. It's a wonderful model to emulate.
Oh, well, thank you so much. This is really a thrill. Menlo Park has changed quite a bit since this original house was built, but we wanted to maintain some of the original characteristics of these kind of relatively straightforward vernacular forms that were deferential to natural environments and also really sort of embedded within the climate of Northern California. I grew up just a few blocks away from where this house is situated, and as a family we used to walk down this street and ride down the street with friends as we would head to the nearby creek. It's a place that I've known quite well and seen over a series of transformations. The challenge is there's a tremendous amount of pressure to build larger houses on these smaller lots. And so how do you maintain the characteristics of a natural environment without sort of puffing up a volume and overwhelming your context? Our thought is that you interpret vernacular forms in a number of different ways. In this case, we took a simple gabled roof and we manipulated it in 3 different ways and intersected those manipulations. The second thought is that you integrate the outdoors as much as you possibly can.
Because budget was a constraint, we focused our efforts on key areas of the landscape, the front yard, the courtyard, and to a lesser extent, the rear yard, which is largely a lawn space for their kids. The front yard was conceived of as a meadow with grasses that sway and blow in the breeze to blur the edges between the hardscape and obscure a required parking space that is used as a patio for the front yard. We thought of the courtyard as a high-density landscape, and given its small size, it actually has the most density of plants. There are 3 types of ferns, as well as a Japanese maple, to give it seasonal interest and shifting perspectives as you experience the space from 3 different angles.
To deal with the narrow lot, we actually made the building even narrower than we had to, so that you didn't feel the kind of restriction of the lot lines, of the presence of the heavy houses on either side of you so intently, even if the house became narrower as a result. So sustainability is important to this project as well, and in fact, we view density as an idea about sustainability. So there's nothing that's less sort of sustainable than sprawl, and so finding a way in which you can sort of densify suburban environments is a way that you can actually reduce the amount of resource consumption needed. Finding ways in which we could use operable windows in order to naturally ventilate as much as possible, and to, in building around these exterior spaces, minimize the need for electrical consumption by not needing lights to balance out your daylight during the day. So the transition to the kind of pandemic life has been an obvious challenge for everybody, and it's put an additional stress and burden on their homes. Obviously, we couldn't have predicted this, but this was designed to treat the last bedrooms as sort of hybrid office slash bedroom spaces. So that extra kind of built-in flexibility has allowed it to sort of weather the pandemic conditions much better. So we learned a number of things on this project, and it was the beginning of a foray. This is sort of thought of as a kind of prototype home, but the way we're thinking about it now is that if you standardize the complicated stuff, you have so much more freedom with the easy stuff, and that easy stuff can be really, really valuable. Now, as I mentioned, I grew up in Menlo Park, quite close by to here, and it is, it's a special kind of privilege to be able to come back and reinterpret the place where you're from, and to feel like you're contributing to its further growth and development. Having the ability to come back to these places over time and be able to engage in them in a positive, constructive way with people that you've known from growing up is a really sort of rewarding part of this sort of architectural practice.
The Merit Award for Residential Architecture category goes to Malcolm Davis Architecture for Pacifica Residence.
So I really enjoyed this project. I could see myself live there. I think it's a combination of these really remarkable found objects and then a very masterful way of weaving in new construction. I think the architect did a really good job of editing. So there's quite a seamless sense of new and old that is wonderfully coexisting here, even to the extent where the completely new structure was designed in such a way that it could have been one of these found objects. It could have been an existing structure. It's really hard to distinguish between new and old here.
Well, thank you very much for recognizing our project for an award. My name is Malcolm Davis. My firm is Malcolm Davis Architecture. I'm a Bay Area native. A lot of our work is on the California coast, so it's fun to see a project recognized in Pacifica. It was fun working with this client on this project because the site was potentially a teardown, but I was really pleased that we were able to keep the house and sort of remind people of Pacifica's heritage of small little fishing houses and not trying to make it anything that it wasn't, but at the same time trying to add the space that the owner needed and trying to make it a Title 24 compliant structure that was going to, go through the next 80 years without water running down the walls. So the challenge with the site was to add the program to the house, add 1,500 square feet to a 1,000 square foot structure without overwhelming it, and creating an outdoor space, which we did by putting the outdoor space between the two volumes of the building. And I thought what was really interesting about when we started working on the house and figuring what we were going to add, I thought it was interesting that owner wanted sort of a work from home space. He kind of liked the idea of kind of a lofty, big, empty space. First thing that comes to mind is kind of like a barn. And I think it's kind of interesting that, over time, there's always sort of been the little farmhouse with the barn, and that those two architectures could be completely different. And I think it's interesting that the house kind of reads that way, that there's the little house and then there's the workspace, which actually is kind of like the barn. And then that they connect at the lower level, but they don't connect at the upper level. The space between the buildings, sort of the negative space, becomes this important outdoor room with these great views of the ocean, and it's protected by the two building volumes. So it's kind of neat. It's this sort of contained outdoor space that's defined by the two volumes of buildings. It's also kind of fun because when the owner goes to work, he walks across the roof deck. So his experience of leaving the house and going to his office does involve the outdoors for about 20 feet. And I think what I always try and achieve in a project is sort of an order and sense of calm and almost inevitability, something where it doesn't necessarily jump out at you when you first look at it, but as you spend time with it, you maybe find cool little details or an interesting way that light moves through the space to animate it. Our attitude about sustainability is if you can not throw something away, it's always a good first step. And the idea was to catch sort of as much character was actually there without sort of creating, not distressing wood, but we had distressed wood, so let's go with that. Sort of working with the strengths of the thing you're given. That's always sort of a good plan if you're trying to make things simpler. We realized that may not be the least expensive way of doing it, but that if we can keep the stuff out of the landfill and we have authentic character in the actual wood that's there, we're not distressing wood to make it look old, that we can actually play to the strengths of the existing structure and make that something beautiful. And then our new structure can sort of learn some of the lessons of the old house, sort of the exposed framing, narrative, and understanding what the building materials are, and sort of built in a new way. So it's kind of funny, we have the new version and the old version, and they're sort of married by the outdoor space. Let's see, I think the material palette, we wanted to keep that sort of reinforcing the two different natures of the building. So we used corrugated Cor-Ten on the barn structure, sort of looks just like a vernacular old shed that could have been there forever. And then the house, we used a cementitious siding because of the proximity to the ocean. We wanted something low maintenance and long lasting. Windows are actually fiberglass, sort of looking for things that would be sustainable and hard wearing that close to the ocean. When I first looked at it, I really didn't know what we were going to do with it. And it's interesting to sort of look at my previous work and think, okay, it was a challenging project and we did come up with a solution. So I think always the lesson I need to take away from things like this is just not being overwhelmed by the task at hand, but sort of breaking it down and starting to think about the solution and what small interventions would we make.
Honor Awards. Honor Award is the highest level of awards. This year, the jury decided to honor 2 projects that they have felt have achieved excellence in design. Both are equal and will randomly start with one of the 2. The Honor Award in Residential Architecture category goes to Field Architecture, Pinion Ranch.
So I think the architects did a really nice job siting this building. So they pulled the program apart. So when you're weaving in and out of the spaces, you get a real sense of living amongst the trees. At the same time, there's a clear hand and rigor and logic to the partie. I also like that it's all oriented towards the north. So you're taking in this amazing view that would be lit from the south, but at the same time, you're controlling solar heat gain, and that contributes to the very successful, what I see here, a very successful passive heating and cooling strategy. So one of the most successful things about this project is the way in which the architects recognize the best assets of the site are the existing trees and the topography. Even though the forms are really strong and there's a rigorous hand here, they're masterfully woven into the site. So you really can't sense anything other than this seamless integration into the site. The architects also did a really nice job with the material palette. It's very simple. It's the board form concrete, the wood and the steel, and it's not deployed in any sort of capricious way. It's very rigorous and logical. So there's a clarity to it, which I think also resonates strongly with the architecture's relationship to the site.
I'm Jess Field. I'm Stan Field. And Field Architecture is a father and son team that we've been engaged in now for the last couple of decades. It really started as a dialogue between us that I think probably preceded my ability to speak. Stan used to bring work home, set it on the dining room table. I used to sit and look at the plans and started studying architecture at that time.
And when he wanted to tell me something, I said, well, here's the pencil, tell me.
The client for Pinion Ranch was a couple that had 4 children. In addition to those 4 children, they had 2 dogs, 3 cats, at one point a goat, and several horses. This is a family that loves to play music, is noisy, and has a busy lifestyle, and all of it needed to play out on the site. The owners came to us and asked for a house where they won't have to chase maintenance around, one where they won't have to worry about the dogs scratching up the floor, one where they could come in and out of the house with muddy boots without worrying about it. So the material language of the house really is a simple, minimal palette of timber, steel, and concrete that repeats itself in various different combinations throughout the house and really ages gracefully as time goes by.
Yeah, so one of the challenges of the site was how could we take the opportunities that the very site itself presented to us, but that were not clearly apparent. For example, that the house was situated on the ridge, and there was this beautiful slope down to the area below, and we turned them into opportunities. And that was going to be the paddock where the horses would practice. And the house then became a kind of an amphitheater to watch all of that. Everything worked out because we used what was there. We didn't change the topography at all. We really wanted this to be a lofty space, just like the trees. So what we did very early on was we built a three-dimensional physical model of the main living spaces of the house, which was the kitchen, the dining, and living. And it reached for the light as well. So we created a monitor roof at the apex. But it was really this that set this sort of language of the architecture, and all the other elements sort of followed on, obviously not in the same sort of scale, lesser scales, and it created a beautiful hierarchy.
As you engage with the house, you walk through the spaces, and each one of them introduces you through a new framed view to another aspect that makes that site so special. In this case, the music barn really is the office. There's a loft at the top of it that functions as a day-to-day office, and it's threaded together with the house. We had actually conceived of it as framing the outdoor space that feeds directly off of the kitchen. But in working together with the landscape architect, we actually decided to extend that and then be able to have a narrow lap pool connect the two.
We also found that we were doing very little excavating as well. But the one place which we needed to was in this jam session space because of the potential noise with the neighbors. And so we actually buried part of that in the ground, and it actually worked beautifully to contain the noise.
The approach to the house gives you a little sliver of a glimpse, a hint through the trees. And as you approach the house, you realize that it is a series of volumes that have spaces in between. And it's those spaces that become the junctions of the house that are working around the trees and giving them space to do what they do. And that really characterizes how we read the overall form of the house, kind of jutting out from between these pockets of the oak trees over the slope, and really just doing whatever it has to do to avoid them. Stan studied with Louis Kahn at Penn in 68-69, and following that went back to South Africa to design his first house. The house was called the Khyber Rock Residence, and it was just outside of Johannesburg, in a really undeveloped place with this beautiful outcropping of giant boulders. Stan made two rules. The first was that no boulder was to be moved, and the second was that no constructed structure was to touch any of these beautiful rocks. Piñon Ranch is a several decade later evolution of that same thinking, where we're approaching the site looking for what we need to build around in order to celebrate what's there already, and create architecture out of the combination between what we make and what nature makes, rather than trying to replace it.
And we have one more honor award. The honor award in residential architecture goes to SAW Spiegel Ihara Workshop for the Voigt House.
Jury agrees that this was a very, very thoughtful and clever project. It's all about editing and being minimal and restrained, but I would say instead of using entirely what is existing. It's an editing on a conceptual level. So I liked how the architects thought of the roof, the space in between the roof and the ceiling as this poche. So again, it's this conceptualizing of the existing structure, and then they carve away at it. So really, this project is so much about carving away at the solid within this poche of the roof structure. I think the architects were really smart in reducing the material palette. It's very reductive, this architecture, so I can't imagine a more successful use of an existing building.
Well, thank you so much. It's really an honor to receive this and a pleasure to be here. I'm Dan Spiegel. I'm the principal of SAW, Spiegel AIA Workshop, which is a small hybrid architecture and landscape architecture studio in the Dogpatch neighborhood of San Francisco. So the concept of this project is rooted in its sense of place, which is Atherton, California. The site is a critical component of all of our projects as hybrid architects, landscape architecture firms. We always think about the landscape first, and even in projects that don't directly involve landscape. So the first phases of this were about the house, but we generated the landscape master plan as the first gesture, as a way to understand how this thing is positioned, because your experience is continuous whether or not you're inside or outside. You don't know that you opened and closed a door, it's all a part of your day. There was this enormous roof structure that actually was the most prominent feature of the entire facade. And as we got inside, we were surprised to find that this roof did not in fact add to the height of the space. It was not inhabitable at all, it was mostly attic. And what we determined was that rather than tearing the house down, that there was plenty there if we could figure out what to subtract. We simplified the geometries. We actually cut a volume off the front of what had been the garage at the house. It's now the kids' playroom. And then we re-roofed the house with a standing seam metal roof, which basically gives it a texture, a grain, has the ability to pick up on shadows, and also become the kind of primary facade material of the entire house.
The landscape approach for the Void House was similar to the concept for the interior, where we carved out some of the excess plant material that was on the site, highlighting the beautiful bones that remained. We cleared out ivy from the existing oak trees. We pruned up crepe myrtle at the center of the house that frames a beautiful courtyard. We cleared a date palm tree that had been covered with vines and overgrown shrubs, and it's now the focus of the lawn space.
The program in a way is quite straightforward. It's a single family house for a family of 4. However, it has the ability, the important ability to have a sense of kind of expanding and contracting, that spaces can be connected but not totally continuous. And that's actually proven to be beneficial as well in the kind of pandemic state that we're in, which is that people can feel like they're around each other, that these spaces are connected, that a closet is connected to a main entry, is connected to a living room. But on the other hand, there are distinctions between them, and there are ways to kind of partition them off. We've taken to building a series of kind of conceptual models for all projects in order to explore the potentials of different conditions of light, of unusual situations. And so in this case, for instance, we had 2 different exhibits that we were a part of that we built conceptual models of this project for. One is a zoomed in detail of the skylight condition as it cuts through the closet leading down to the master bedroom that we rigged with a series of animated light. It's meant to be a kind of register of experience over time. The other was a model that we actually made a little bit more extreme than the existing condition, which is that we had this original observation about the kind of top heaviness of the space. And so we said, what would really exemplify that? Well, we cast the roof in concrete. Just the nature of building that model of this concrete roof, treating it as more solid than it was, so we had to be super intentional about the things that we were taking away, really kind of opened up a series of different ways that we could think about those spaces. We took that model, we turned it on its back, suspended it above a mirror so that you could understand the relationship between the geometries that we inherited and then the ones that we were producing willfully. And what that led to was a series of spaces, geometries, connections that we couldn't have anticipated, that we probably wouldn't have designed on our own, but were mediations between both our intents and the thing that was there. One of the nice things with having the opportunity to work with friends on a project, and the clients are good friends of ours and have been for many years, not only do we understand each other, not only is it possible to really sort of relate to their experience and their goals in a way that's either spoken or unspoken, But you have the opportunity to sort of experience the way that this thing works over time. And you can come back. We've had many gatherings at the house with them over time. And you can see what's successful and what's not successful. You can see how the plans that you make diverge or adhere to the way that things actually end up going. You can learn from opportunities of, their own sort of creative use or misuse of the space. And so I think it is an essential thing to be able to learn from a project after you release it into the world.
Now we have reached our last and final category in our design awards, the People's Choice Award.
And the People's Choice in Architecture category goes to Boulevard Recreation Center, designed by Group 4 Architecture, Research, and Planning.
The People's Choice for Interior Architecture goes to DES Architects and Engineers for 181 Fremont Public Lobbies.
And the People's Choice Award for Residential Architecture goes to Square 3 Architecture for Sunrise Sunset House.
Once again, we want to acknowledge all of the architects for submitting their projects to the 2020 Design Awards. You can visit all of the projects at aiasmc.org. Thank you and goodbye.
Congratulations.